Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On this Wednesday, welcome to Ask the Theologian. Glad you're here. I'm Dr. Randy White. We take your biblical, theological, and worldview questions and give them a solid, biblical, rightly divided answer with a little bit of snarkiness every now and then, just for fun. And if you have a question and you're watching live, you can put the word question in front of your question. That helps us to not miss it. Or you can go to askthetheologian.com where you can ask your question 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Tonight, we have a Wednesday night Bible study, local programming here in Taos, New Mexico, that we will broadcast about 10 minutes after 6 o'clock. And would love to have you join us, whether that is live or archived. And you can do it right here, this same place, randywhiteministries.org, worshify.com, youtube.com/Randy White, wherever it is you'd like to listen. And we're going to study Silas, who's also known as Silvanus. We'll talk about how do we know those are the same guy, and what did he do, what's his legacy, if you will, in our Faithful Footnotes series. And with that, let's jump into our questions today. And we're going to start out with Roger down in Sierra Vista, Arizona. And Roger sent this question in via Ask the Theologian. He says, where do you get the idea? He's blaming it on me. Where do you get the idea? I probably have said it. That there will be no sun in the eternal state. He mentions Revelation chapter 21, verse 3, and the city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon to shine in it, for the glory of God did lighten it, and the Lamb is the light thereof. Now, do some research for me here, Luca. Find some cross-references on Revelation 21:23. What I want to know is there any other place that explicitly tells us there is no sun? Because Roger's got a good point here that what we really have is the city had no need of the sun. Now, that is very different than having no sun. Can we find an explicit place with no sun? Now, in addition to that, is there anything, let me see. Anything in the eternal age? We know very little about the eternal age, but is there anything in the eternal age that gives us the idea of night and day? I'm not sure that there is, but doing a little search here to see if I can find anything that. Here we go. Luca gives me Isaiah chapter 60, verses 19 and 20. The sun shall no more be thy light by day, neither for brightness shall the moon give light unto thee, but the Lord shall be unto thee an everlasting light, and thy God, and thy God, thy glory. Now, check that. Do verse 20 as well. Okay, excuse me. The sun shall no more go down, neither shall thy moon withdraw itself, for the Lord shall be thine everlasting light, and the days of thy mourning shall be ended. Now, that, I would be surprised. Luca's going to do the work on this. I would be surprised, but I'm surprised at a lot of things I run into in Scripture. If that's not seemingly about the millennium. Is there something in that context that tells us this is the millennium? Now, as he's looking at that, one of the things I would say is there could be spillover into the eternal age And whereas the Hebrew prophets don't separate, divide out the eternal age from the millennial age, it's just the eternal kingdom, and it's all put there. And so there could be some discussion of what we would call the eternal age from the book of Revelation that they just put in the eternal kingdom, so to speak. So this could be there. Yes. Find that verse. Luca's my computer. We're gonna add a few verses in here. Let's see. I don't know. You got a couple of things in here that interesting topic of study. Psalm 89 verses 36 and 37. This possibly we would say this is poetic, but it does say, "His seed shall endure forever, and his throne as the sun before me. It shall be established forever as the moon, and as a faithful witness in heaven." This is one of those things, however, you remember in our Ecclesiastes study, Solomon says something like the earth endures forever, and yet, we have 1 Peter that talks about the elements melting away. Could this be kind of a Solomon, Ecclesiastes, sitting on the front porch kind of talk rather than scientific talk, where here it does say that not only his seed shall endure forever, his throne as the sun, endures as the sun. It shall be established forever as the moon. Now, could we put that together with 1 Peter that talks about the elements melting away? There's a new heaven and a new earth. How much does that mean if, indeed, as we take Psalm 86:37 here, the moon shall be established forever? What are we going to do with it? One of the issues, peripheral issues on this, is there's a lot of the Psalms that we take very literally, and I think probably rightly so. Can we pick and choose between the Psalms and say, okay, this forever is literal, this forever is not literal? What do we do with that? Is there indeed no sun? So let's just put these two verses together, and then we're going to add to some of them. But his seed endures forever as the sun. But over here in Isaiah, the sun shall no more be thy light. Okay, but the seed is enduring. That's kind of what the prophet, the portion in Isaiah chapter 60 is about. It shall be forever as the moon. So neither for brightness shall the moon give light. Now let's see if we can put this. The moon shall no more, I'll get this. The moon shall be no more thy light. Technically, it doesn't say I'm getting my suns and moons and all these mixed up, but it doesn't say the sun is gone. It just says the sun shall be no more thy light. Now, put that with the city has no need of the sun. So here in Psalms, we have one all the way on the right side of the screen that says the sun and the moon last forever. Here we have, but they're not your light, and that's the same thing as in Revelation. You don't need them. There perhaps is another source of light. In fact, Revelation says the Lamb is thy light. So can we, or should we quit saying the sun ceases to exist? Now, eventually we'll have to deal with the 1 Peter passage. But let's go in. Luca, I think, has probably got some more scriptures for us. Let's go to Isaiah 30:26. First of all, that Isaiah 60, is that a millennial passage? We think it is. But as I said earlier, I wouldn't be surprised if there's not some eternal age stuff in the millennium we don't have a concept of 1,000 years in the Old Testament, so it could put all that together. Okay, Isaiah here I've put this on the left side of your screen here. 30 verse 26. Moreover, the light of the moon shall be as the light of the sun, and the light of the sun shall be sevenfold as the light of 7 days in the day that the Lord bindeth. Okay, so in the millennium, it talks about the moon being as bright as the sun and the sun being 7 times more bright than it is today. Now that's the initial reading of that. We discussed this in some sermon or Bible study not too back far. Do you remember what that topic was? We both remember talking about it. So Luca brings up a good point here. Moreover, the light of the moon shall be as the light of the sun, and the light of the sun shall be sevenfold as the light of 7 days in the day that the Lord bindeth up. So is this talking about a specific day? We got into that yesterday. Or is it talking about something in a more millennial kind of thing, where the Lord is bound up? I think that was maybe Phil's question yesterday, if memory serves me correctly. Now, let's add one thing. What's the first or second Peter passage? The elements shall melt away. Let's look at that passage and see. And you do have, while I'm finding that passage also, you've got the passage that speaks about the moon or the sun shall turn to sackcloth. I don't think that means the sun goes away, and I don't think that's permanent, because that's at the great and terrible day of the Lord, and after that you've got sunshine. But what are we on? First or second Peter? Second Peter 3:10, where it says, "The day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise." Now here I think we're talking about, let's say, the atmosphere. It's hard to, are we first heaven, second heaven, third heaven? Is this all of outer space when it says the heavens shall pass away? You got a lot of stars falling and whatnot during that time. Or is this a little more the lower atmosphere that we're talking about, and just keeping it within the Earth's bubble, if that's a way to say that? So the heavens shall pass away with a great noise. The elements shall melt with fervent heat. That's kind of an interesting thing, because I think that scientists think that the sun is mostly what? Helium, which is an element, one of the most foundational elements. And yet it's not an element that melts. Melt is not it burns. Shall melt with fervent heat. Could this go with the sun is 7 times brighter? The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up. So could we put this to the day, tie that together, and say, hey, there's going to be a day when the sun is going to be 7 times as bright. The moon is going to be as bright as the sun. In whatever sermon that I was taking that, I took a different route on it. I said that during the millennium, the brightness of the sun is something that will be equipped to handle, and it would be a good and a positive thing, a brightness to that day that we don't have on this day. But maybe we should look at it this way and say, oh, wait. We're not talking about a millennium of a bright sun or an eternity of a bright sun. We're simply talking about one day of a very hot sun that is going to burn everything up. I'm pretty sure if we ask AI or something, what would happen if the sun was 7 times hotter or 7 times brighter, and I think light and heat go together, what would happen? It would probably say the earth will melt with fervent heat. So, can you put, to really make sure we answer the question here, can we say there is going to be a day that the Lord bindeth up the breach of his people. One particular day. That day is 2 Peter 3:10. It is the day of the Lord. And on that day, at the beginning of the millennium, on that day, everything melts up with a fervent heat. The earth also, the works therein shall be burned up. Or do you put this day in the day that the Lord shall bind up? Could you put that with the 1 Corinthians 15, at the end of the millennium, then shall the Lord offer up the kingdom. The last enemy has been taken care of. There's no need for this anymore. Let's rework the whole thing. So we've got a question, beginning of the millennium, end of the millennium, and beginning of what we call the eternal age. Where are we going to place those? And then ultimately, does that just mean the sun gets hot, but then goes back down to something of a normal status, whatever the new normal is at that point, and the sun and the moon last forever? So somehow you would have to say, okay, the elements shall melt with fervent heat, don't melt the moon away, nor is the sun ceasing to exist. I think, to get more to the heart of Roger's question, I think that we've got I think we overstate our case, which is where Roger's getting at. Where do you get the idea that there will be no sun? I think we're reading too much into the eternal city, which hath no need for the sun. And I wouldn't be surprised. We would want to solidify this a little bit, if we can solidify it, because now we see through a glass darkly. I wouldn't be surprised if we would find out that the eternal age has a day and a night, that is very much a part of creation, the created order as God intends it to be, and has that day and night forever and ever, except perhaps in the holy city. Now, does the holy city, the New Jerusalem that hath no need for the sun, does that become the light source for the earth? Assuming the earth in that day is still a global sphere, which I would hold to, that implies a light side and a dark side. You know, if there's no need for the sun there, is there a need for the sun anywhere? Or do you have the sun on one side and the city on the other side, and so the earth is always daytime? A lot of different scenarios you could put together. I don't know that we'll ever completely have the answer, other than there's little bits and pieces that we could probably put together and see if we can come up with something. But, you know, we got Charles here from the Villages in Florida, where the sun shines 365 days a year and everything is perfect. Oh, he's done some research. Okay, a 7-time, increase the temperature of the sun 7 times, and it would take 2.5 hours for the sun to melt the earth. Is that right? Oh, to melt steel. Okay. What about titanium? And Stephen down in Florida also asked a good question, you know, the Sunshine State. By the way, I've spent some time in Florida, and I live in New Mexico. New Mexico has a lot better sunshine than Florida. I'm just saying, I don't work for the Chamber of Commerce or anything, but does a supernova or a star collapsing shine brighter? I think it does. I think there is a brightness before it goes out. Now, you know, I read that in the Scholastic Reader, so they also told me the world was going to freeze by the 80s, so who knows what's up. An hour and a half? Oh, titanium goes quicker. Okay. Cocoa Beach, Florida. We're getting all the Floridians here. Kurt and Brenda, good to see you here today. Florida is in the room. Rhonda adds, it says, City, could the rest of the world still need the sun and the moon? Seems like a difference. And I think that you could really make that strong argument. The city has no need for the sun and the moon. But what about Cocoa Beach, Florida? Might have the need for the sun and the moon. And is it such a different world that we can't even begin to we can't even begin to ask the right questions, because we're dealing with what is instead of what will be, and we don't know what will be to figure all that out. Excellent. Thank you from sunny Arizona, Roger Bays, for that question. I appreciate that one. Let's go to Pastor Timothy. This one came in while I was on vacation as well, trying to back up and catch a few of those. Looks like also a Revelation question. Revelation 7:14 says, there are they who have washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb. And then 22:14 says that they do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life. And he points out the NIV there in that passage says they wash their robes. Okay, Pastor Timothy says, it appears that there is an element of works of righteousness required during the millennium, much like the gospel in the first half of Acts. I would agree with you. Yeah, if you're agreeing to that, I would agree with you. It does appear. I agree with you that it appears. Okay, but let me continue. He says, as with Cornelius and Saul before Agrippa. Yeah, exactly. This is, shall we say, covenant. Even in the new covenant, which is promised for Israel, not for the church. Even in the new covenant, there is an element in which the Lord enables them to do all of these things, and there's still this works element that is given to them. Okay, Google AI says the following. During the millennium, temple sacrifices will serve multiple purposes. This ought to be interesting, because before I read, I'm going to predict there's going to be something about they're just a memorial. They don't have any substance to them, these millennial sacrifices. Which I don't want to stray too far from the question, but I think the millennial sacrifices actually do what sacrifices do. That is, they atone for sins. There are other sacrifices, which are praise sacrifices, thanksgiving, things like that. But sin sacrifices, which are definitely in the millennium, burnt offerings, they atone for sins. It's kind of interesting to me that there's the dispensational world, Acts 2 dispensationalism, struggles with the millennial sacrifices and says, but we can't have those. We can't have those because sacrifices atone for sins. And what in the world are we going to do with that? Because this is the millennium and sin has already been atoned for. But then if you catch them on another day and say, what was the purpose of the sacrifices in the Old Testament days? They'll say something like, those were a memorial to that which was to come. So if they were always a memorial, why do they have a problem with the future ones? I think deep down inside, Mr. Acts 2, they weren't a memorial. They were efficacious. Is that the right word? They worked. They did their thing. They atoned for sin. And that's why you have a problem with them in the future. By the way, Pastor Timothy is not Mr. Acts 2. He's a good right divider like us. Let's go on. Google AI says the following. During the millennium, temple sacrifices will serve multiple purposes. They will function as a continuous memorial. Didn't take long, did it? I know this because I've been around enough stupid evangelicals to know what AI is going to say, because AI on its default is going to go to what everybody else says. It read all the books out there, just summarizes what everybody else says. I was actually having a conversation with AI this morning, and Luca wasn't with me, so I had to talk to somebody. And I can't even remember what I asked about. It was some random kind of thing. And it just spit out the answer so quickly. So I was like, how do you answer so fast? And one thing it said is, I'm going to put this in my own words. It said, I get to know the person I'm talking to. And I kind of know their thinking, so I know their outlook, and so I tailor my answer. So I said, so people who don't use you as much don't get as good of an answer. And it basically said that they get a more standard answer. So you just go, you don't have any memory built up in AI. So for example, if I go to AI right now, if I pulled up my AI and showed it to you and said, give me your viewpoint or tell me what 2 Chronicles 7:14 means. It's going to give me a right divided answer and say, other people will take it this way, but a right divider would understand it this way. Now, if you just go, you're not logged in, whatever, you just go do that, it's probably going to give you a standard evangelical answer. So the standard evangelical answer right here, they will function as a continuous memorial to Christ's sacrifice, similar to the Lord's Supper, honoring God's holiness and fulfilling his promises. Additionally, the sacrifices will serve as a ritual of purification, preventing defilement from polluting the temple. A ritual of purification. I don't think you could substantiate that from the Torah. The Torah had rituals of purification, like when you got leprosy, this is what you did, whatnot. But you take Leviticus 1 through 5 and the sacrifices that are, or is it 1 through 11, the sacrifices in the first part of Leviticus, those were not rituals of purification. They were atoning sacrifices. But anyway, additionally, the sacrifices will serve as rituals of purification, preventing defilement from polluting the temple. They will also provide a way for those living in the kingdom to maintain a relationship with God and receive temporal forgiveness for their sins. Now that's interesting. It kind of gets there to say these sacrifices actually do something. Didn't state it strongly, but it kind of got there. Finally, AI says, the sacrifices will provide a visual illustration of the atonement for those who will be born during the millennium, demonstrating the need for death and Jesus' pathway and forgiveness. This sounds like dumb theology books you read at seminary, because it's got all the various theories of the atonement sort of packed in there. Pastor Timothy comes in and says, many have said that the temple sacrifices are only a memorial. Do you believe they will be more significant? Okay, I probably answered the question before I got to the question, but yes, I do believe they will be more significant. I believe they will serve the same purpose as the previous sacrifices, in that they will atone for sin. Now, what would be an interesting conversation, I don't know that we'll have it here. That's always my way of saying, I probably don't know the answer of this, but we should study it someday. What would be an interesting conversation is to say, can those, like Israel, in their glorified body, can they sin? Because they seem to be bringing sacrifices, not just for themselves, not just for the nation, but also for themselves. Now, not every sacrifice is a sacrifice for sin. But you've got the Day of Atonement, which is a sacrifice in a sense for national sins. Okay, but if the nation is already restored, refined, we used those words yesterday, what you know, do they need it? So many issues there. But Luca, find me the passage in Hebrews, I think it's maybe chapter 10 or so, that talks about the sacrifices of blood and bulls and goats are sufficient for the cleansing of the flesh. I believe it's something. I know it says the cleansing of the flesh. And let's pull that up and get it correct here. And I would say those millennial sacrifices at minimum are going to do the same thing. Really, I think there is an eternal nature to the Torah. Granted, it has been set aside right now. We're not under the Torah, but it will come back and it will be in effect. It's God's government, and so it's going to be carried out perfectly, unlike it was under, you know, say the judges or the kings, be carried out perfectly under the Messiah, under that constitution. Hebrews, 9:13. If the blood of bulls and goats and the ashes of a heifer sprinkling the unclean sanctifieth to the purifying of the flesh. Okay, now let's take this if right here, and we won't go into the grammar of it, but you've perhaps heard before that this condition is met. Yes, this is what happens. The blood of bulls and goats and the ashes of a heifer sprinkling the unclean do sanctify to the purifying of the flesh. And obviously, you know, it goes on, how much more shall the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, purge your conscience from dead works. I think we've got a juxtaposition of flesh and conscience down here. But this is what Hebrews 9:13, that's what sacrifices do. He's speaking in the present, by the way, because it was a time in which there was still a temple. There will be a temple in the millennium. There are sacrifices in those temple, in that temple. The same thing that happened in the previous temple will happen in the future temple, and happen in a perfect way. So I don't think temple sacrifices were ever memorial. Now, were there any? Again, I mentioned there's several kinds. You know, a peace offering, a praise offering, whatnot. Were there any? Look this up. Sacrifices in the Torah that were purely memorial from a Torah point of view. Now, once again, you may have to filter through some junk there to see. But I'm thinking they don't really have memorial sacrifices. We're bringing this sacrifice so that we can remember, you know, the Alamo. So I think this whole thing about memorial sacrifices is made up by theologians. Doesn't exist. Wasn't a memorial sacrifice. Let's see if Luca can prove me wrong on any of that. Okay, he says no. He says he can't prove me wrong. None of them were symbolic, is that what you said? Yeah. Yeah, you know, you get the peace offering, but it was a fellowship offering. It was to come together to celebrate the real peace that is in the nation, and that it wasn't symbolic of anything. It was exactly, you know, it had substance to it. So therefore, I think, I didn't know we were going to get here on this question, but I think we can hereby definitively say that the Bible has no such thing as a memorial sacrifice. That is completely and wholly man-made, I should say seminary-made. Which, by the way, this year in Branson, we are going to be studying a systematic theology from a biblical literalist point of view. Because what the seminaries say is not worth a warm bucket of spit. We want to know what the Bible says. Seminaries just make stuff up, and then they repeat it a lot. Let's hit a little question comment from Rhonda and then go to Robert down in Mississippi. She's speaking of AI and how AI kind of tailors the answers. Doesn't that sound rather democratic, politician, or evangelical of AI? Interestingly, sound like it will tell you what you want to hear. There is very much that sense that it does tell you what you want to hear. And so you have to be careful with this, because what I have noticed, and I haven't done a test on it or anything, but Luke and I have even had a conversation about it. When you challenge AI, it tells you, whatever. And you say, are you sure about that? And it says, oh, well, you are right. You're right. And you keep challenging, and every time it's, oh, yes, thank you for pointing that out. It has a desire to go along with you. And so you do have to recognize that. And therefore, you can't just trust what it says. You better. The challenge is confirmation bias. Someday we'll play a test when we got more time and, pull two AIs up next to each other and have one argue, this position and the other argue the opposite position, and, make one think this is what we want to hear and the other think that's what we want to hear. And I think that it'll give you what you want to hear. We could say, Grover Cleveland is the best president there ever was. Prove it to me. And it would. Grover Cleveland is the worst president there ever was. Prove it to me. And it would. It wants to give you a thumbs up. And then if we disagree with it, are you sure about that? Well, that's a very good point. It's enlightening that you brought that up. It will praise you, sing your praises. If they ever get it to sing, it's going to start singing, blessed be the name of the one who's talking to me now. There we go. Let's go to Robert in Crystal Springs. No, I get that wrong every time. Holly Springs, Mississippi. And did storms go through there last night, Robert? I don't know. I know they went through a lot of the South. Revelation 20, 11 through 15, I saw a great white throne. The heaven fled away. There was no place found for them. How does that tie in with what we said earlier? I saw the dead, the small and the great, standing before God. Books were opened. The dead were judged out of those books. The sea gave up the dead, death and hell. They were judged, every man according to his works. I went through that kind of in a paraphrase sense. Robert says, is the purpose for the opening of the bread of life to show that none are in that book? Or is it more of a selective process? The text at face value seems somewhat non-specific. Yeah, it does. So you've got the question, why are we opening? We have these books, another book, which is the book of life, and the dead were judged out of those things which are written in the books, according to their works. And then down at the end of 13, they were judged every man according to their works. In fact, down in 15, whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. Now, probably you could make a decent case to say the book of life is opened, as Robert says, to show that none are in that book. Here, look, we have all of you standing before. We've looked at the book. We've double-checked the book. We have seen. If you want to come up and look yourself, your name is not here. And therefore, to go down to verse 15, you don't go to the land of the living. You go to the second death. Now, with that, evangelicals, of course, have made quite this doctrine of the book of life. I wonder if we're not reading more into this than ought to be. Maybe I'm questioning this too much. When you get the books were opened, the books appear to be, there appears to be a difference between the books and another book. So they're going to be judged out of the books. This seems to be an accounting book, if you will. Tells what they've done that they're going to be judged for. But this book of life is that book of the living? Look, everybody not alive is here. Now, maybe that presses it to the point of stupidity. Yeah, we're dead. We're not alive, so we're not in the book. It's almost like a census roll. You know, they don't come to your house at the time of the census and say, okay, I'd like to know what people used to live here that are now dead. They're not interested in that, except in Democratic precincts. So why is there a need for a book of the living? But I would say there's a decent case to be made that the book of life is not all those predestined, or the roll that's called up yonder, not the redeemed, the book of the redeemed, but rather it is the book of the living. And their names aren't there. That's why they're called to this judgment. But even if you take it as the book of the saved, then I think you probably make the best point in terms of how to understand this is it's there for appeal purposes. A contrast to show us what's going on that we ought to be looking at there. Thanks, I appreciate that. Good question. Let's move along to Jamie in Lilliwap, Washington. Are the New Testament Hebrew epistles, sometimes called the Hebraic epistles or the general epistles, those, we tend to count them from Hebrews on, the epistles there, from the book of Hebrews on. Sometimes after the book of Hebrews, which is what, 1 Peter? Jude, John, those epistles. Are the New Testament Hebraic epistles written for both the future time when Israel will once again be the focus, but also important for the Jews in the apostolic era? I'm going to stop right there and say, yes, I think so. We sometimes say, and I think we say this too loosely, we say these are books written for the tribulation. The reason we say that is because they don't have a direct application to us today. Only a right divider would say this. but they don't have a direct application to us today. And yet, when the age of grace is taken out of here in the rapture, it concludes back to that era, then that's what it's for. But I don't hold the position that that's their sole purpose. I don't hold the position that Jude, when he was writing, or Peter, when he was writing, that they weren't giving information that was very relevant in the day in which they lived, as you call it, the apostolic era. So it looks, if you take the book of 1 Peter, for example, it looks to me like Peter is telling the scattered tribes what they need to do today. It just so happens that doesn't apply again directly until you get scattered tribes in the days of the tribulation. And they pick up the book of 1 Peter and say, hey, lo and behold, this one is for us. This is direct. This is very much in line with Hebrew scriptures, with the Old Testament. It doesn't have, it recognizes, obviously, the ministry of Jesus and Jesus as the Messiah and presents Jesus as the Messiah, but it doesn't have the age of grace, other than Peter makes a little mention about, hey, check out Paul. That's very much for those in his day. So I am going to go, as you have said it, written for both the future time when Israel will be once again be the focus, but also important to Jews in the apostolic era. Yeah, I'm going to say yes, both and. Now, Jamie goes on. Are spiritual Jews, she put that in quote, spiritual Jews, and then a parenthetical, believing Christ to be their king on earth now or just in the future? Is there a reference to, in the Hebraic epistles, to spiritual Israel or spiritual Jews, something along those lines? I want to see if there's an exact reference where we should be building off of here, but the short answer to that question, I'm going to say, is no. There are Jews who believe Christ to be their Messiah, their king. And those are Jews who are even expecting a future physical fraternal kingdom. They would take the view the same way that you and I would. Maybe even, Arnold Fruchtenbaum. But the difference is, there is no kingdom offer today. And since there is no kingdom offer, there is no kingdom obligation to carry out. And therefore, really, there's neither Jew nor Gentile today. So there was when Peter wrote, or Jude or John. There will be in the future, but right now there's not. So in that sense, there is no spiritual Jew or spiritual Israel. Do we have a passage that relates? I didn't think so. Okay. Jamie goes on to say, seems like the writers of the Hebraic epistles are speaking to a current audience. I agree. How to get to a future kingdom. I agree, because the offer was being given there. It was remote. It was a stretch to see how in the world are they going to do it, but it was within the realm of possibility. Today, it's not even in the realm of possibility. It will be again in the future, but there has to be some ability for the Jewish nation to make a Jewish decision at this point. Now, how to get into a future kingdom. And do they, past, present, and future, make up spiritual Israel? Do they? Okay. Well, you say past, present, and future. I don't think there's a present that works here. So past and future, if we want to say spiritual Israel, let's just change that to the Israel of God, to use that particular passage, which, where's the phrase, the Israel of God? I believe that's in one of the Peter, but we'll check on that. The Israel of God is the remnant of Israel, what I think you're referring to as spiritual Israel there. Yes, Galatians 6:16, as I was saying. It's in Galatians. And as many as walk according to this rule, peace be upon them, and mercy, and upon the Israel of God. I think, and Drew Elrod's got a little booklet that we sell on Dispensational Publishing on this. The Israel of God is this spiritual Israel or believing Israel. They are Jewish people who believe Christ to be their king, their Messiah. Thank you. Jamie on the West Coast up there in Lillywop. Appreciate that. And sorry, I'm clicking buttons here. Clicking buttons trying to get everything right. Let's go. I'm torn on where to go. But let's go to Edith in Missouri. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Edith. You reminded me. I'm not going to do the question right now. She submitted some Proverbs. I would like you to submit some Proverbs as well. For tomorrow night, you can go to Randy at randywhiteministries.org, or you can go to the question box at Ask the Theologian. And I want you to just give me Proverbs from chapter 10 through chapter 26, any of them, to say, I'd like you to cover that in the Proverbs series. There's 600. We're not going to cover them all. But there are some you might say, this is problematic to me. I don't know what to do with this one. So just skim through over your peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Open the book of Proverbs and skim through. Start at chapter 10, go through chapter 29, and look through those and pick up, hey, that ought to be in there. Discuss this and submit that to me. I appreciate that, Edith, and so we'll save that for Thursday night. And so let's see. We might conclude the day. I don't know. We'll see how many questions. If we might have room for more. But we got Valerie in Kentucky, who has a question regarding Galatians 2:11 through 14. Let's just start out there. See if we can get a context. When Peter was come to Antioch, I withstood him to the face because he was to be blamed. When a guy's wrong, probably ought to just tell him. Sometimes nice, sometimes blunt. We ought to grow up, and we don't want to hurt their feelings. They might, they might have had a bad day. Yeah, but we can keep them from having 2 bad days. But before that he's giving us what he's blamed for. Before that certain came from James. He, Peter, did eat with the Gentiles, but when they were come, he withdrew and separated himself, fearing them, which were of the circumcision. And other Jews dissembled likewise with him, insomuch that Barnabas was also carried away with their dissimulation. But when I saw that they walked not uprightly according to the truth of the gospel, I said unto Peter before all of them, if thou, being a Jew, livest after the manner of the Gentiles, not as the Jews, why compellest thou the Gentiles to live as the Jews? That is, why are you supporting those who teach the Gentiles need circumcision? The Jews, who are Jews by nature, not sinners of the Gentiles, knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by faith of Jesus Christ, even we have believed in the Lord Jesus Christ. I'm going to stop right there. She mentions 11 through 14. Okay. Did Mosaic law prohibit Israelites and Jews from eating with non-Israelites and Jews? You know, the answer is almost always yes, but the answer we give is almost always yes. But I think the biblical answer really for the most part is no. There were times when you couldn't, but it really, I think we're going to have to go and say this is rabbinic tradition. This is the interpretation of the law. Now, those traditions are going to be based on something explicit. They didn't just gather together with the rabbis and say, you know, I think we ought to just say this. They built it off something, but it was typically, let's say, an abundance of caution. Here's this text. What do we do with it? How do we keep from breaking it? Well, out of an abundance of caution, let's don't ever eat with Gentiles. The Passover, it was, and Valerie mentions this, Exodus chapter 12, verse 8. The Passover was reserved, that's Jewish people only, or circumcised people only, which would make them Jews. But, you know, they spent a lot of time in Egypt. That's going to be before the law, so I don't know that that's going to be great. But Ruth and Boaz, let's try Ruth, I don't know, chapter 2 is where we meet them. Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's, a mighty man of wealth, family of Elimelech. His name was Boaz. Ruth the Moabitess. Maybe you could argue she's already converted to Judaism here. Said unto Naomi, let me go now into the field to glean. Probably you would say she's a Jew by this point. She's already said, your God is my God. We would want to look into that and confirm that, but I don't think that would be a case of someone else. But Solomon certainly had foreign wives. I suppose he ate with them. So when you come to, by the time you get to Peter, even at the home of Simon the Tanner, I think this is going to be the case of rabbinic Judaism. By the way, something you can put in the back of your mind. Rabbinic Judaism is what we call it today. That is what the Pharisees were. It was tradition, oral law. And so Jesus often was against oral law. He wanted to stick to the text. Virtually all of Judaism today is the descendants of the Pharisees. That's what lasted in the diaspora. We go on. Valerie says, in the context of Galatians 2, I don't think it was necessarily about Peter, whom he was eating with, but rather his segregating himself with the Jews was influencing the Gentiles toward Judaism. The bigger problem in Galatia, correct? And to there, I would say correct. The issue is not so much who you're eating with, although in Acts chapter, what is it, 10? You do have that issue of Simon the Tanner and Peter going to the home of Cornelius. You know, we don't do this. He was a strict Pharisee in that regard. We don't do this. But the issue was, hey, you'll come eat with Gentiles? But then you want the Gentiles to become Jews? What's up with that? So that is the bigger issue. Thank you, Valerie. Appreciate it, and hope you avoided the Kentucky storms that were there. Let's see. I happen to catch here, and I've got just enough time to answer it. I'm out of time. But Lionel, good to see you here, who comes to us live on YouTube. By the way, Lionel, in the future, we're happy to take you anytime. Put the word question in front of your question. That helps me not to miss it, but I did happen to catch that one. John 14, verse 12 is the basis of his question. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth on me, the works that I do, shall he do also, and greater works than these shall he do, because I go to my Father. Now, the question is, are spiritual gifts still available today? This particular passage, a very interesting one, where, he says right here, greater works than these shall he do. Greater works than those of Jesus? By the way, if you want something interesting, look up John Wimber, who is the founder of the Vineyard movement. And he founded the Vineyard movement based upon this. He was kind of a non-charismatic evangelical. And he read this verse and said, hey, wait a minute. It says right here, greater works than these shall he do, because I go to my Father. And John Wimber says, he's still at the Father. We're supposed to be doing these greater works. And so he started the Vineyard movement. I actually heard John Wimber. I was in a meeting, face to face. And he was talking about the founding of the Vineyard movement. At the time, he was suffering from throat cancer, had to put some liquid on his throat quite often, and eventually died of that, which is a bit ironic. But the question is a little more general that Lionel asked. Are spiritual gifts still available today? My answer is no. No, they're not. And that's shocking for some people because it's such a prevalent thing in what I'll call the evangelical industrial complex. The use of spiritual gifts, discovering your spiritual gifts so that you can find your purpose-driven life, so that we can, as the pastor, we can put you in the spot where you're going to be most effective to help us grow and build the kingdom and all the other garbage stuff that they talk about. Is there, it's so prevalent. I think, let me see if I can push all the right buttons here. I want to open up a new window here and go to worshify.com. If you go to worshify.com, it may look a little different than this when you get there because I'm logged in. But if you go to worshify.com and just click right here, search title or teacher, and put spiritual gifts. In fact, here I've just got the word spiritual. But we could go ahead and narrow it down, put spiritual gifts. Here I've got 3 sermons. My most recent is this one right here, session 9 of Is It So? Spiritual Gifts. Examines the biblical basis for spiritual gifts, questioning their modern applicability. Critiques evangelical interpretations. Now, if you want a little bit longer, go to this Unlearning Spiritual Gifts, Part 1 and Part 2. But again, Worshify type spiritual gifts right there, you'll find that. And there I give the full kit and caboodle about why I do not believe that spiritual gifts are a thing for today. And I don't think that should surprise us. There's a lot of things in the Bible that aren't for today. I think spiritual gifts is one of them. So I think, and I'm sure I said this on those sessions, you go to discover your spiritual gift, you are going on a wild goose chase. You are not going to find it because it's not out there. I am much more of a, I'll take the old saying. I don't know who originated it. Probably some crazy evangelical that I disagree with, but I'll take the saying. I am much more the guy that says, hey, you don't need a spiritual gift. Just find a need and meet it. Find a hurt and heal it. That is, hey, here's something that needs done over here. I think I'll do it. Okay. Rather than, I got to find my spiritual gift and make sure that this is what God's purpose is for my life. No, we need somebody over here to do it. So figure it out. It's not rocket science. And even you take these spiritual gift things, none of them are rocket science. Look, I know I'm supposed to quit. But spiritual gifts. Let me just look at a couple of them here. If you look at the gifts. Trying to find a list of the spiritual gifts. Prophecy. I mentioned that in those others. I'm going to skip that for now. Let's say ministry, teaching, exhortation, giving, leadership, showing mercy. These are some of the spiritual gifts. Hospitality, showing mercy. Does God from heaven really have to give some spiritual empowerment for that? There are excellent teachers out there that are unsaved. They're teaching physics or whatever, history. They're great teachers. You mean to tell me you can't study the Word of God and learn how to teach? There's principles of communication. There's some comfort level things. There's all the things you work with. There's some experience. Anybody can do it. Exhortation. Anybody can be an encourager or an exhorter. Hey, why don't you do this? I think anybody. Giving. Get a job and give it away. Doesn't take a gift. It just takes, there's a need. I think I'll do it. Leadership. You learn it. All leadership is learned, 100%. Hospitality? Get a crock pot. You can do it. We don't need the Holy Spirit to empower us for these things. Now, some of those gifts, like prophecy, like healing, like a biblical speaking in tongues and interpretation of tongues, those were things that actually took the Spirit enabling you to do it. There was a time and place for those. I think these other things, even like the gift of giving, which you get from Romans 12. Romans 12 is not really a thing of spiritual gifts. It's just, hey, if you like to give, give well. If you like to exhort, exhort well. If you like to teach, teach well, whatever. It's almost Paul saying, whatever thy hand finds to do it with all thy might. But you get into some of the others, like 1 Corinthians would be a great place to study spiritual gifts. And you got, wisdom, a word of knowledge, the gift of healing, the works of miracles. These are things that you had to be gifted for. I mean, the Spirit had to make that happen. What we like to do in the modern gifts is make it stupid stuff that you don't really need the Spirit for. Again, like hospitality. Anybody can be hospitable for an hour. Then it might be pushing the limit for some of you. But there we go. Okay, gotta quit. I am out of time. Thanks, Lionel, for that question. I appreciate that. And 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you can submit your questions at askthetheologian.com. If you put an email, we will reply back to you when we get to it. And put that in. Appreciate that. Thanks for clicking the thumbs up and all those. And maybe tonight, see you for a study of Silas Silvanus in the New Testament. And back tomorrow for Ask the Theologian. Submit your Proverbs to me. I would love to get those. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, it is it's time to go. That's what it is. And appreciate you being here. I don't seem to find my music here, but that's okay. We'll see you later. God bless you. Thanks, each one of you.